Okay, so as you can see, I've sort of jumped ahead a little bit. I've done a little bit of detail on this. Using most of the same techniques, made an alternator, a couple belts, raised that air filter up. So basically that's my carburetor. It's simply a box with a bunch of pieces glued onto it. No sizing, just whatever I had laying around on the bench pretty much. Right, I've also got that oil filter down there. I'm going to put a couple hoses from here to here and probably tie into the front fairing somehow. I'm not going to do that quite yet. I want to see how the rest of the fairings and the rest of the body go before I tie all that together. So I'm going to start in on actually building the cab for this. And if you see, I've actually put another little box, just plain old styrene box on the back of this, and I've got this long strip here. This is simply for alignment when it slides in. I'm going to have the body drop in and slide forward a bit, and if you look close, let's see, I've actually drilled some holes in the side of that box. Now when I have this whole thing mounted, the engine is going to be screwed in by these holes here. And these ones up front here. I can't even get my finger at it. But I'm going to bring the cab forward enough that I can't use that to tie into. So I need some place to tie the body together. And this is simply a way of doing it. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do, and then I'll show you how I'm going to do like the firewall and stuff like that. Probably on this section. But anyways, let's get to it. Okay, so I've got another piece here. This is going to be the firewall. And it's got some oddball cuts in it. This is simply to get around all the mechanics in this thing, right? Like if you look at it, and I put it on, I've got to clear a servo arm that's moving there, and I've got to clear the top plate of the whole body, as well as the belts and everything that's already been installed. Now, if you look at this, I've got a screw already in there, and I've got a piece that's like this. I'm going to drop this in behind and screw it on, and then I'm going to actually take the firewall and I'll throw some tape underneath so it doesn't glue itself together, and I'm going to trap that piece with this firewall like that. Now there's going to be a gap in here, but I can fill that in later. It's not really a big deal. But this way I can take this screw out, and I got one the same in the other side. I can take it out, and this whole piece should just slide out like this with these attached. So I'm going to glue that up, and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, as you can see, I've got this thing actually mounted now. And to give you an idea of what this exactly does, this allows me to have an attachment point here without having to access these screws that are in the back here. Because I'm going to cover this with a shroud, and probably the windshield is going to be somewhere here. I can't use them because I can't get a screwdriver at them. So I've taken these screws out already, and this piece just slides out like this. That way this whole body, when it goes back together, will pretty much self-align itself. Right? And there was a little gap at the back here. I'm actually going to take another piece, and I'm actually going to attach it here, and it'll beef up this joint and this joint all the way along if I go all the way around, and then I'll probably put it back together again and throw another piece across the top just to hide the seam. Alright, I've put this thing back together as much as I have right now, and before I build off of the firewall and back, I got to keep more than a few things in mind. I've got to get some electronics back in this thing, and I've also got to get some battery power sooner or later. Now this is actually a smaller battery than most guys run, that I know at least. This is a typical 5000 mAh 2-cell, and as you can see, it's actually quite a bit larger. I mean, I don't need this much power for this. I can get an hour of runtime easy out of something this size. This is a 2600 2-cell. You can find these in the aircraft section, usually at the hobby shop. They go for a little bit less than a big 5000, but they're decent quality battery, and it's not going to get bashed around like it would in a trail truck or a scaler or something like that. So with the soft case, it shrinks the size of it quite a bit. Now, the other thing is I've got to think about where I'm putting my receiver back in and where I'm putting my speed controller back in. Now, I've got to meet up with my motor wire somewhere along the line, and I've also got to meet up with a battery wire somewhere along the line, as well as getting this thing plugged into this thing. And I've also got a servo wire that I need to plug in here, and I'll probably have a light kit plugged in here too, just to light it up at the end. But I've got to figure out where this is going to go, where this is going to go, and where this is going to go. And then I've got to figure out how to route all the wires without touching any of the belts or pulleys or any of the steering arms and stuff like that that's going to be moving when this vehicle is moving. So I'm going to play around. We'll see if I can find some decent places for this. I know where I'm roughly going to have space at this point, so I've got a pretty good idea of how I'm going to put things in. But I'll start zip tying some of these back together, and we'll come back and show you what I've got. Okay, so nothing too complicated in this. I mean, I spent probably an hour, hour and a half just trying to figure out where the electronics and batteries and everything were going to go, and how to sort of route wires and everything. I've actually taken the servo wire and run it on the underside of the top plate, down underneath beside the motor, and run it out, and it actually pops out here. I've dropped the receiver. It's a pretty small receiver. I've dropped it right behind the battery. Now there's not much clearance on this, but I've moved it as far back as I possibly can, and there's enough room to plug all my accessories in there. Battery, pretty standard. There's not many places it can go. I'll build a bench seat across here, so I'll just throw a cover across it, and you'll see exactly how it sort of hides later on in the build. Now, the back of the truck, that's where I've got my speed controller, and it's already zip tied to the tower, the shock tower, and it's probably going to have some sort of a plate or something mounted on the shock tower, so I can actually put some servo tape on the back side of it and stick it in place permanent. But I can worry about that later when I get to the back of the truck. It's in a fairly good spot. I mean, this will have something coming up behind it, and I might even try and get these fins to stick out the back just for a little bit extra air cooling and maybe some detail on the car. Now, the one thing that I do want to bring up is, if you look at this side, my battery wires are coming up, and they're coming up beside my pinion and my spur gear. Now, if these bounce around, they're gonna probably rub on the spur gear. So when I build the cab and the bed of this, I'm probably gonna have to put some sort of a plate across here just to keep this separate from. So I'll make some sort of a cover for this, and it'll probably be attached to the back of it. But that way, this isn't gonna bounce into the spur and destroy something later on. Okay, I've got another couple of pieces on here. All I did was made a second bulkhead in behind this firewall. That's simply to form the radius of what's going to be left in the hood. I'm actually going to wrap a piece of, this is 1/2 mil styrene, so it's fairly flexible. I'm going to put 2 layers on this eventually, but I'm going to be able to roll this over the edges, and if I do it slow enough and like just sort of glue it a little bit of a time, or at a time, sort of stitch it for this much and then this much and let it dry between, I should be able to get it to roll and fold in fairly close. And if you look up front here, I've actually put a couple of wings in the front here. I'm going to bring part of this forward, and then I'm going to come up and try and catch this wheel with part of the cab. I want some wheel coverage on this, so I'm going to probably come up and over and down here somewhere with some wheels, and I'll figure out that later on. But I need something to build off of so that I can actually come up. I'll probably double that up, maybe even triple it up, and when I come from here, from this bulkhead all the way across the front, that'll create a strong joint that I can build something off of this direction. I'll tuck the headers from the engine inside, and I'll probably pop them out the back end somewhere, just sort of superficial. I'm not going to do as serious as I did on my last one. But anyways, that's the direction I'm going so far. We'll give you a shot when I'm finished this. Okay, so it's all glued up. This is basically what it looks like. It's already attached, and it's as you can tell, fairly solid. If I can actually get a grip on it, I can pick the whole car up with this, even with just the 2 screws into the engine block in there. I'm gonna sand this up a little bit. This is probably it for this video. We're gonna probably on the next one build some flooring and a bench seat, probably a dashboard. Dashboard's going to be a little tricky because they're going to have to put some magnets in there for door latches. So I'm going to have to do a few dimensions to figure out how big my doors are, how thick they are, and where I'm going to start my dashboard, because on each end I'll put a magnet in it. I'll go over that on the next video. Anyways, like it, share it, comment if you want. Ask me a few questions. I'll try to get back onto a computer again here pretty quick and give some answers.